Hello, Scorpio rising. So your 2025 forecast from the mind here of Nicholas, Sparkles of Gold. Obviously, I have a bunch of things to talk about here from a broad scope for the upcoming year. As you, a Mars-ruled person, Mars rules you. So we always pay attention to where Mars is. And this year starts off with a massive Mars situation that has really been starting to kick in. It kicked in at the end of 2024 with a Mars retrograde that started in Leo. And when we get to January 6th, the first week of 2025, Mars will go all the way back into the sign of Cancer, where it will move through Cancer, go backwards, stop, eventually go forward, and finally leave the sign of Cancer when we get to April 17th and 18th. And what does this mean for you? Well, as you know, when Mars wants something, when Mars is desiring something, Mars wants to take action and go for it, grab it, fight for it. Mars, in a sense, the will of oneself, where one has to initiate and take action in the world, must do that in the world. And when Mars is retrograde, it doesn't run on all cylinders. Mars has a bit of a frustration here. It has to be forced to kind of sit around and review and revise here in the sign of Cancer, a fellow water sign that you have an affinity for. Cancer rules all things that deal with internal emotional process, in the sense how we nurture, how we like to be nurtured, the feelings place, etc., protection, that being ruled by the moon, that sign. The reason why you have a connection to that sign is because you're also a water sign. So when something ever always happens in the sign of Cancer or the sign of Pisces, you are going to be affected by it. Most of the time it's harmonious, but when we have a Mars going backwards retrograde cycle, everything has to be reviewed. So let's say that here it actually focuses on the part of your world and chart that deals with, they call the ninth house. This is the higher learning place, the philosophical place, what you believe in. It could be what you, how religious you are, pursuing religions. It's foreign travel. It's dreams, in a sense. It's all these places where we go seek out truth, and there's the ways that we do it. Sometimes we go to school, we find a mentor, we travel, right, to explore. And here in this exploratory place, there is some sort of internal review process, internal review of what is your highest truth and what you align with. And you get to explore this a little bit. I think in general, this transit for you is pretty good considering Mars retrograde cycles. In other signs, it's a lot more difficult, but I think inherently you have something in all this because you have a probing nature. I think the pacing and the type of focus that you're used to, that might be the tough part of this. Eventually, when Mars moves forward and goes through the sign of Cancer, eventually we'll leave that, and then in springtime it will move into the sign in Leo, which then affects your career house, your reputation house, how you're seen, your profession, and your ambition involved. But before we get there, we need to take care of like what you stand upon truth-wise, because all those things you do with learning, higher learning, truth, religion, even astrology is ruled by this place. They funnel into the career place, into the profession and reputation place. So we're going to do a review there. This part of your chart will come up again here later in the year, and I'll get to that. Second, we want to talk about the first week of February because something symbolic happens there. The planet Jupiter that deals with hope, faith, expansion, seeking out of things, right? They call a benefic planet Jupiter. It gives life to things, just like Venus does, right? So it has been going backwards since the fall and winter of 2024. And this has been happening in the part of your chart where it deals with resources that you're tied into with other people or institutions, etc. Now, this deals with other places like the darker fear side of things at times, and then the occult areas of life, which I think you have a penchant for, so it's no big deal. But in a sense, most prominent is resources that you need or are tied into with somebody else. And there's been a review process happening there in the fall of winter 2024. And that review process, in a sense, stops the first week of February. The day is February 4th, and it moves forward. And it will work this area that I mentioned all the way to the beginning of June. I think you have a chance at this point to apply what you learned at the end of 2024, and you need structure to and discipline to enhance and make the vision and the quest that you're seeking in when it deals with resources and the creation and connection of resources. Here you get to apply it here for February all the way till June. Okay, now that place is going to get tapped again here later on in the year, and I'll get to that. I also want to stop here and mention too that I want to give you 2 lunations, a new and full moon. I'm doing this for each sign. I'm going to give you yours. Basically, I just want to give a date here. These are later in the year, but there's going to be a full moon that happens on May 12th, 2025, that happens in your sign of Scorpio, right? And then we want to look to a new moon that's going to happen at 28 degrees Scorpio on November 19th. Those are your new and full moons of the year. Now that I have that out of the way, speaking of lunations and full moons, they're also connected to eclipses. We are doing 2 cycles of eclipses this year. One of the cycles happens in March into April, and the other one happens September into October. I think you're familiar with eclipses, Scorpio risings, because it wasn't too long ago where you had to deal with massive change in your life. Several years ago, this was happening in your world and how you deal with relationships and everything. You went through a superb, I'll say in the end, change, but I know it was difficult. This time the eclipses in 2025 into 2026, they happen in the signs of South Node Virgo and North Node Pisces. These particular places for you, Scorpio rising, we're dealing with what they call the creative house of the 5th house. 11th house is the place that deals with community and who your supporters are of your dreams and aspirations, where you eventually can have triumph in your life. Who are the people and the alliances that help you with something like this, right? Now, the eclipse that happens on March 13 accesses the area of community and friends and those who might support your aspirations and dreams and your hopes, but I don't think it flows the way you would like it. And this is going to be a theme in that area because there's some sort of purging that needs to happen. And usually when certain types of eclipses hit this area, there is a beginning and a process of washing away what is not needed and what does not work anymore. It could be that there's certain alliances and communities and groups that do not function for you anymore, and you've been noticing something that isn't working the way it used to. And with eclipses in Virgo there, they get flushed out eventually, and it takes about a year and a half. Now on the opposite end there, in the sign of Pisces, that particular part of your chart has to do with how you create and what your creative expression is and how you pursue pleasurable things, which I know you secretly like to do this. And I think here, this isn't a surprise either. It's also tied in, this area is also tied into what your sexuality is, how you're connected to the spirit and life of your sexuality. And that's the Pisces part of your chart. There will be eclipses and lunations that happen here for you this year. And I want you to concentrate on a particular situation that's going to happen here on September 7th when we have an eclipse that happens there dealing with Pisces in that area. It will be on the September 21st, several weeks later, that community and friends place will also go through another analyzation and revamping where something gets pulled out or needs to go. Again, these places in your chart that deal with your creative expression, the things that you do, how you pursue things that are pleasurable in life, and the other part is your desires and hopes and your dreams and community supporting them. That's where the eclipses will be happening this year. So saying that March is power-packed because not only do we have eclipses, we have several other things that happen. During that period of time into March and April, we will have Venus, planet of desire or love, desire, what we, how we value things, relationships, money, resources. This particular planet will be in Aries in March, and then that planet will stop and go retrograde and move backwards. This process takes about a month and a half, 2 months. And while it does this, it will first start off in the backwards place when we deal with the part of your chart that has to do with how you do day-to-day activities, from to-do lists to certain tasks in your life, the habits and regimens that you need to serve your work or whatever projects that you're working on. These aren't like dramatic places. These are the places where you're like chop wood, carry water type of things, and it can be monotonous, but something there is changing and has been, I think. And I think for the last year, when the eclipses happen in the sign of Aries, you've had something new come into this area of regimen and habit and how you serve. But here, Venus comes in, and there's something aesthetically, I think, that you need to look at. And I also think there's something to do with possible finances going on here. And basically, you wake up, what time do you do this at? What's the next thing you do at? How you organize your work and stuff. All those things are under for review. So while Venus moves in Aries through that part of your chart, it actually goes back into the sign before, all the way during the retrograde cycle, back into the sign of Pisces, which is this place that deals with how you go for your pleasurable things, your pleasurable pursuits, creative expression, children even, sexuality, etc. So now here, as we've been talking, you see there's been several things going on touching this area of your chart, right? So not only does that happen during eclipse season, when, this is activated, you also will have a Mercury retrograde during this time that starts in Aries, in the 6th house in your chart that deals with that regimen and to-do list, and it goes all the way back into Pisces into your creative house. So not only will you have Mercury retrograde in Pisces in your creative house, you'll have Venus doing it, you're going to have eclipses starting there, and for the last several years, you've had the planet Saturn, the taskmaster that deals with reality and mortality, reality, discipline, authority, suppression at times, the taskmaster that shows up in your life that makes you deal and restructure and rework things in your life from the base core level, right? This planet for the last several years has been in your pleasure house too. And for the last more than a decade past that, another planet, Neptune, that deals with illusions, visions, dissolving of things over time, dream world in a sense, that's also been in your creative house. So there's so much activity that is happening in this place in the springtime. I think it's unavoidable. I think you will have to be very real with what does give you pleasure or what types of things in your life you want to bring in that do that. And especially for you who, when you're focused on something that you want, right? Being a Mars rule sign. And once you do focus about it, the obsession that's involved, there's nothing that gets in your way that you want to follow through on whatever it is you're focused on, to have this concentration that in the place that deals with, pleasurable things and pursuits, there's definitely a ending, but also something incredibly beautiful waiting for you here. Again, with these many planets going backwards and eclipses and so on and so forth, there's endings. There's things that need to be put in the trash, per se, metaphorically, or let go of. Now, I have the ultimate confidence that you'll deal with this. And the reason is when, like I said earlier, when anything ever happens in another water sign, and for instance, all this Pisces stuff, right? Whenever it does, you actually has a natural affinity with you because you are a water sign, Scorpio. So these are interchangeable. Who you are in the world and how you approach the world, for metaphorically, how you view the world through a certain glasses that you have, the lenses and the filters. Just like these glasses, the lens is the rising sign and yours is Scorpio. You view the world and enter the world that way. Not only that, but your spirit, your vitality, your actual physical body, right? All of these things is what you take and rise into the world with. And this pleasurable pursuits place and creative expression place, have so much activity happening there, it actually connects to how you push out into the world. So they're connected here. And so I think for the most part, whatever you have to do to put yourself in the place of understanding what tools that you need to express yourself creatively, I think is a great way to do this. And it takes care of your body, your actual physical body, and your mental capacity, and everything that you put in together, what we call like the life and the personality of who you are. Creative endeavors fuel this, okay? So enough of that. We'll talk about something later that has to do with that, okay? So saying that, springtime's interesting. And spring, and before we hit summer, we have two interesting things happen with other planets. The planets that I mentioned earlier, Neptune has been in the sign of Pisces for a long time now. Saturn's been there for the last couple years. They're going to move out of that sign of Pisces in the spring and go into the next sign of Aries. And they only stay there for a brief period of time, pretty much for all the summer, right? And then eventually they will go back into the sign of Pisces in fall and winter. And what you have to understand here is now when we get into the Aries part for those several months, is that hits the part of your chart that I mentioned earlier that deals with how you do things, how you work, your regimen, your to-do list, your day-to-day activities, things also too like your body. Parts of the way that you treat your body in the world every day, what you put into your body, what you eat, what do you work out or not, etc., etc. Those things are about to have a massive influx of energy that comes in there, and there's going to be a restructuring that wants to happen. You get hints of this already, but in the summertime you get it. Then those two planets, they go back into your house of creative pursuits, how you want to creatively express yourself. And at that point is those other eclipses in the fall that will be hitting that creative place again in your life. You will have some things to clean up there, but you'll have some new things to bring in. So if you're catching what's going on here, many of the transits this year in astrology leave and finish, it seems, and go into a place and then hang there just to give you a hint of what's next. And then they go back to clean things up or to finish storylines, okay? So saying that, Neptune will go into Aries March 30th and go back into Pisces around October 22nd. Saturn will be in Aries, affecting this house again of your tasks and little things. It'll be on May 24th, moves all the way and goes in and goes back and stops, goes back into Pisces on September 1st, back into your creative house. You could see what's happening here. All right, so saying that, we in the beginning of June, we're mid-year, we're at the midpoint of the year here. Jupiter, the planet of expansion, hope, faith, optimism, the seeking planet, the buoyant planet itself, will leave the sign of Gemini after being there for a year. And we talked earlier in this conversation about shared resources that you need that are tied to other people, and it will leave that part of your chart and move into the next sign of Cancer, which affects the place in your world that deals with what you believe in, your faith, higher truth, travel. Foreign travel is the traditional way of saying this, spirituality, pilgrimages, even your dreams. And this place, if you remember now, at the very beginning of this video, I mentioned how your ruling planet Mars was going to be retrograde at the beginning of the year in the sign of Cancer, in this zone that I'm talking about. But here comes Jupiter now for a year in that place. And I feel for you, Scorpio, this is a huge transit that starts all the way from June 2025 into 2026 summertime, where I see you doing more traveling possibly. And if you've been thinking about it, start making the plans and start understanding what it is. Or maybe it's in the vessel of learning, where there's a workshop or a particular thing that you've wanted to study for a while and get really deep with and in depth. And there's certain mentors or schools or places that that you've wanted to meditate or worship at that deal with this higher truth connected to your code and your ethics. And Jupiter, this buoyant planet, is about to enter that realm. And as I said earlier, whenever we have a planet go into another water sign, it vibes with you, Scorpio, because you're a water sign. So here at this point, we actually have this feeding into you as a Scorpio rising and how you're going into the world with your body, your physical body, and your vitality, right? And the visions that you have and the dreams you aspire to and the truth that is behind all of that, along with movement going on in the place in your life that deals with pleasurable pursuits. Is it finally now, after 4 years, 5 years possibly of dealing with major crises that people didn't know about in your life, do you finally here in mid-2025 into 2026 get to actually do what the hell you've wanted to do for a while? And you get to feel actually happy and show that? I think it's there. It's funny. I'm doing all these videos for other people, and there's some other signs that deal with a lot more harder stuff. I think what you've been through since 2018, right? And I'm looking at you right now because I could smile about this, but I've heard your stories since then. I've heard them all. And wow, they've been difficult and dark and regenerative, And here, I think rewards await you. The biggest thing here is you have to be true to yourself and to the world about what you want to focus on, right? The code and ethics that you stand upon that drive you, right? And also the tools that you use that help creatively express yourself, or the pleasures that you want to bring into your life that are healthy and not destructive, okay? The combinations of these 3 places in your chart can have this amazing flow, okay? It's so good. It's like I get to give you some good news. I haven't for so many years. There is a little caveat to all this, though, and I'll get to it because I think it's interesting. Summertime, we have planets like Neptune and Saturn moving into signs, and then temporarily. And then we have another one in July, which is Uranus, the planet of shock and unpredictability, of liberation. This planet carries lightning bolts in the people's world, and wherever it shows up, it wants to go to the deepest part and rock the boat. Change what has been habitual, change what needs to be changed, to bring in something new, to liberate the area. Now, sometimes people don't do well with surprises and shock. Other people, they have affinity for this, right? Now, when it does this in July, it will be leaving a certain part of your chart temporarily. That the place it left was the Taurus part of your world, and that is your relationship house, and has been an uprising with eclipses and planet Uranus being there since 2018. And you've been through so much in relationships, and not just intimate ones, which I know you like to get into once you focus on that one person, but all types of partnerships, right? Whether it's business or friends or etc. There's been a revolution happening in that part of your chart. Now, it seems to be like, oh, I'm finally done with all this. And then Uranus goes in the Gemini, right? Basically, in the summertime. And that part of your chart we talked about earlier has to do with resources that you want to be or need to be tied into. So, that type of place gets a little bit of something, a little bit of juice. But just when you start to have it, Uranus stops and goes retrograde and goes backwards. And for the second half of the year, and especially fall and wintertime, Uranus goes back into your relationship house where Taurus is there, and you have some things to finish up and to clean up. Just when you thought you were done with doing a lot of relational work internally and externally, Uranus will have some things to say, and there's another surprise or two waiting there. Again, you have to be real with yourself. I think you have been and have done a lot of work in how you deal with yourself in the world and the other, like the mirror that comes at you. I think you've done it, but there's a couple things left, and that will deal with the second part of your year to fall into winter. Eventually, in 2026, that planet Uranus will go back and into Gemini for 7 years and leave your relationship house. Saturn and Neptune in Pisces will finally go right back into Aries and get into that place that deals with your regimen and day-to-day activities, and in a sense your health, and in a sense these little things. It will be there for a while too. So you could see how 2025, things moving forward, but then just when they do, we go back a little bit, deal with some past stuff, and then finally we get to go into a new realm in 2026. There's a lot more obviously involved in the year. You can only do so much on these videos, but I always like to leave a special something at the end for my Scorpio risings. I hope you've been kind to yourself. When Mars, your ruling planet, doesn't run on all cylinders or has a hard time, there could be, in a sense, a thing of where Mars likes to heat up and inflame and cut and sever things in one's life, and it can get very extreme. The beginning of the year with Mars being in Cancer, I think is okay for you, but also tend to your feelings, tend to the stories, emotional stories that are in your body. They're actually in your physical body. It's places where it might even be trapped. Old stories emotionally that are hidden in a certain pain that you have, a certain ankle twist that you have. These little things, they might not mean anything. But I'm giving you examples of emotional processing that is healthy. And I think in the end, for a Scorpio and Scorpio risings, if they do not have an outlet to push out Mars energy, that's where things get off balance, anger, illness, manipulation, obsession, where you get completely off balance. And I think you've done a lot of work with this the last several years. So remember, we want to use tools in your life that help you express through your physical body, right? Through other tools that help with creative expression. And if you can incorporate healthy, enlivening ways, pleasurable things in your life, I think that concept can get you through most of the year when you deal with things that are off balance or challenging situations, right? Sometimes you can't keep it all in and all private. You got to get it out, right? All right. If you made it this far and you're new to this channel, please hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to know when I go live. My followers know me from my live streams. If you're interested in the year ahead reading, sparklesofgold.com, you could see my booking link in the copy here. I'd love to talk with you. Again, I got a thing for you, Scorpio risings. I've publicly said it. I love talking with you. I love being as honest as I can with you, and I think you want that. You crave that, because I ain't afraid of you all. So I don't mind doing it, okay? In the meantime, you can always go back and review this video. And I want to thank you for watching your forecast for 2025. Stay blessed.